lights go dim, it's time to find out what's within. Behind the camera, there's so much more. With the Andy Games, let's explore. Behind the camera with Andy Games, meet the streamers, learn their names. Off the screen, who are they? Tune in now, don't delay.
Hello everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera with Andy Games. This is the podcast where I interview people from the world of content creation and beyond with the sole purpose of getting to know the person a little bit better behind the camera. In this episode, I sat down with Teri M. Brown. Born in Athens, Greece as an Air Force brat, Teri M. Brown came into this world with an imagination full of stories to tell. She now calls the North Carolina coast home, and the peaceful nature of the sea has been a great source of inspiration for her creativity. Not letting 2020 get the best of her, Teri chose to go on an adventure that changed her outlook on life. She and her husband Bruce rode a tandem bicycle across the United States from Astoria, Oregon to Washington, D.C., successfully raising money for Toys for Tots. She learned that she is stronger than she realized and capable of anything she sets her mind to. Teri graduated from UNC Greensboro with a multitude of degrees, majors in elementary education and psychology, and minors in maths and sociology. She just couldn't settle on one thing. While homeschooling her 4 children, she began her writing career by focusing on small businesses, writing articles, blog posts, and website content. During this time, Teri published 5 non-fiction self-help books dealing with real estate and finance, receiving first runner-up in the Eric Hoffman Book Awards for 301 Simple Things You Can Do to Sell Your Home Now, finalist in the USA Best Books Award for How to Open and Operate a Financially Successful Redesign, Redecorate and Real Estate Staging Business, and for 301 Things You Can Do to Sell Your Home Now, an honorable mention in Forward Magazine's Book of the Year Award for Private Mortgage Investing. In 2017, after finally getting out of an emotionally abusive 14-year marriage, Teri began dabbling in fiction, a lifelong dream. Upon winning the first annual Anita Bloom Ornoff Award for Inspirational Short Story for a piece about her grandfather, she began writing in earnest and published her debut novel in 2022, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow, a historical fiction set in Ukraine. Her second novel, published in 2023, An Enemy Like Me, takes place during World War II. Her latest novel, Daughters of Green Mountain Gap, a generational story about Appalachian healers, came out in January 2024. In June 24, her short story, The Youngest Lighthouse Keeper, came out in the anthology Feisty Deeds, Historical Fictions of Daring Women. Her latest book, 10 Little Rules for a Double-Butted Adventure, is an inspirational look at the life lessons she learned riding across the United States on a tandem bicycle. In April, her first children's book, Little Lola and Her Big Dream, will launch. Teri is a wife, mother, grandmother, and author who loves word games, reading, bumming on the beach, taking photos, singing in the shower, hunting for bargains, ballroom dancing, playing bridge, and mentoring others, especially youth and women who are having trouble discovering their worth. Learn more at terrymbrown.com. Here is the interview. Teri, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on Behind the Camera with Andy Games. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I wouldn't have had it any other way. So yeah, let's just get straight into it. So you are a novelist, writer, author, all of the above. Tell us about your journey. How did you get into writing? Is this something that has always been a part of you, or would you describe it as maybe a product of like your experiences throughout life?
I think it's a little bit of both. As a little girl, I said I wanted to be an author, but I also said I wanted to be a brain surgeon and an Olympic ice skater. And I don't like the sight of blood, and I am the most klutzy person you've ever met. So the 2 of the 3 were never, ever going to happen. But I did love books.
Yeah.
And I was the kid that would be sent to bed, and my mom would come in and yell at me because I was under the covers with a flashlight reading, because that's just, I was just a book kid. And I always loved reading, and I wrote bad poetry in high school like most teenage girls, and wrote little stories, but I never expected it to go anywhere because my parents were very much of the belief that when you went to college, you went with the intention of getting a degree that would land you a job.
Yep.
And writing was not considered that. That was the same as going into acting or something in which you had to be a waitress and then you could maybe, So I went to college. I actually got 2 majors and 2 minors because I had no idea what I wanted to do. I got married. I had children. I got divorced. I got remarried. And writing just wasn't part of all of that. There was just a lot of things going on in my life. In 2000, I started writing for small businesses. I found this niche. I homeschooled my kids. I wanted to be able to be home, but I also needed an income.
Yeah.
And in 2000, the internet was relatively new, and there were a lot of companies that were putting their websites out, and they didn't know what they were doing. And what they wrote was subpar, let's put it that way. And they had good ideas.
Yeah.
They had great businesses, but they didn't know how to put it out there. And I started reaching out to these companies and writing their content for them. So I would write things for their website, write things for their blogs, create email campaigns and whatnot. But during that time, I really wanted to be writing my own stuff, but I was living in an emotionally abusive relationship. My second marriage was emotionally abusive. And, you know, when you're going to write fiction and put your characters out there on the line, that's scary. And you need a safe space to land should it not go well. And I didn't have that in my home. And so I didn't do it. But in 2017, I finally got out of that relationship and words started pouring out of me. And that's kind of where it started. I started writing like a crazy woman at that point, but I was still terrified to let anyone see what I had written. And it wasn't until I met my husband, Bruce, and he and I went on an epic journey where we took a tandem bicycle ride from the coast of Oregon to Washington, D.C., that at the end of that, I thought, I can do absolutely anything.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of can I do it? It's a matter of what do I want to do? And the answer is, I want to be an author. And 14 months later, my first novel came out.
It's incredible. Like the journey that you had in such a a short space of time, really, from the last 5 years, like, and even from like 2017, you know, coming out of an emotionally abusive marriage, having almost this like new lease of life almost, and like you say, the words just came pouring out. How much of that do you feel was all the words coming out was maybe things that you'd been like bottling up and choking up for so long coming out just onto a page, like your experiences?
I think there was a lot of that, because you can see a lot of me in those early manuscripts that I was writing. But I also think that I'd been having these ideas for a long time, but I knew that I was not in a place where writing was going to be an okay endeavor.
Yeah.
So I just didn't write them down. But at the point that I get out of that relationship, it was like those ideas were now screaming, look, you've waited and you've waited and you've waited, start writing us down. And so I did. And, you know, my first manuscript isn't good. It's long, but it isn't good. But I tell people, I doubt Picasso's first painting was good either.
Of course.
You know, you have to start somewhere. And that first manuscript, what it did for me was it showed me that I could write 50,000 words, because I sat down in a 2-week period of time and I wrote 50,000 words. And I thought, wow. And it had a beginning and a middle and it had characters. It had all of the main things that a story would have. It's just, it wasn't well written because I didn't know what I was doing. But I figured, well, I've got to start, and now I know what to work on.
Of course, so, absolutely. And I think you could ask any writer or author what they think of their first piece of writing compared to their current works, and I'm sure you would get like a very similar answer. Because I mean, I don't know too much about writing myself from a personal experience, but from like a creative standpoint, it is something you have to throw yourself into. You have to really just and when you first do these things, you could just throw anything out there that's in your mind and it's like, this sounds good, but then the more you go on, the more you kind of like study the art of these things, you learn about like depth and development and everything like that. And sometimes
you learn things like my first character was perfect. She was absolutely perfect. She could do no wrong. I don't care what I threw at her. This girl came out of it with flying colors. Part of that was, I think I needed to be that person in my head, right? Like I needed everything to go well. But nobody wants to read a story like that. You know, I said, she reminded me of like the girls that used to be like on Baywatch. and they go running into the water and they dive in and they come up and their hair is all gorgeous and perfect and their makeup still looks done even though they've been in the water. People want to read characters like me. I go running into the water. I get caught at about knee level. I fall in. I come up. I've got seaweed in my mouth. My hair's in my face. That's what people want to read.
Yeah.
And I think it just took me a little while to allow my characters to have flaws and to be real and to not be able to solve every problem that came their way graciously, and that sometimes they made horrible decisions and very bad mistakes and had to live with those and then figure out what to do next, just like real people. And once I gave myself permission to allow my characters to be real and to have real life problems, then I started writing things that could be published.
Yeah. It's an incredibly interesting thing, because when you get into like writing, it's almost as if there's this initial heroes and villains kind of mindset that you go into, because that's always the way it is, in most creative arts. It's like there's a hero, there's a villain, but they're not exactly like humanized in a sort of empathetic way. Like there's, you have the hero can do nothing wrong. The villain is just, you're meant to like hate them and stuff. You're meant to love the villain, but at the same time, like, where's the sort of the depth of the character, where's like the development, and how can people relate to that? And it's exactly what you said. People want to read about these characters who, they read a paragraph and they're like, that's me right there. Like, and
that's me, or my friend, or I can imagine sitting down and eating lunch with them.
Yes.
Like those are the kind that, like, those are my people, and you want them to be sufficiently flawed that people can root for them, that they can say, oh, come on now, you can do it. You've got this, right? Mm-hmm. Because if they're completely perfect, you start thinking to yourself, I don't care if she gets it. She shouldn't get everything she wants. I mean, you don't want that. And then on the flip side, you don't want to make your villains so horrific that they're not redeemable. Yeah. You've got to give them, at least allow people to understand why they're as bad as they are. Yeah. When you can look and you can say, okay, I still don't like them, but I understand how they got where they were.
Yeah, of course.
If I had that experience, if my mother had treated me that way, if I had lost my child, if I had whatever it is, that no, maybe that's not the way you turned out, but you can at least say, well, I understand how they turned out like that.
Yeah, of course. And like I say, empathy is one of like the most important things in storytelling. People need to have something to relate to, because I know for everything that I've ever read before, I've always envisioned like either the scene itself playing out in front of me or myself in the scene or whatever it may be, but you can picture it in your head, and you can, you give the characters like an accent or something. You kind of really just play it out, and obviously I think that's a sign of good writing. So obviously you have now 3 published novels, correct?
Three novels, and then I just had my 4th book come out in February, and I actually have a children's book, a picture book that's coming out this spring. So yeah, I've got lots of things in the works.
Amazing. So in terms of your novels, talk us through like the writing process of each of them, like, and your sort of learnings from the first novel. Am I correct in saying was 2021 or 2022?
Yeah, 2022, January 22 is when it came out. And then January of 23 and January of 24. And then in February of 25 is when my latest, which is an inspirational memoir.
It's been busy for the last few years then, it seems, nonstop, which is obviously what you want. Is what you want, and you again your first ever novel published, and then you just want to kind of go on and on and on. So tell us about these novels then. Are they similar in different way, in their own ways, I should say, or is it sort of different stories?
They're all very different stories. They're all historical fiction, but very different places in history. One of them, it's historical fiction, and it makes me cry because it's 1970s. And that means that I'm historical fiction, and that's just a little hard to handle. Wow. And I have a World War II genre, and I have one set in the 1890s in the mountains of North Carolina. So very different in that respect, but all of them have very strong women characters. Definitely in the realm of a women's fiction, where if you define women's fiction as strong women characters with a full arc, that you see them
Yeah.
go from someplace and become something else in the meantime. So yeah, I do have that. I kind of write what's in my head.
Yep.
I don't really think too much about genre or, marketability. I probably should think more about marketability, but I have stories. And when they're there in my head, I have pretty much no option except to get them out of my head and write them down.
Yeah.
And once they're down, then I say, okay, what do I have here?
Yep.
Now I'm going to have to market it. How do I market it? Okay, well, this one kind of fits into, and then I give it a label. I don't usually start out with saying, I'm going to write a historical fiction today, or I'm going to write, it is what it is. And
Yeah.
then we have to give it a label for Amazon and other places.
Yeah. So do you think then possibly because your first novel, historical fiction, that just kind of maybe flowed, that the writing process was kind of, okay, well, this, I'm good at writing this is kind of where my ideas come from, like,
Yeah.
not that you've like labeled yourself as a sort of
Right.
historical fiction author, but like it's just where you're in your element in terms of writing.
So I tell people that I'm a character-driven fiction author.
Yeah.
I love characters. So as long as I have a good character, I'll go with them. The manuscript I'm working on right now is actually contemporary humor. So completely different from anything I've written before, but that's the character that was in my head who's demanding a story. But I think why I probably started in the historical area is because I love writing and I love research. And historical fiction is like the perfect meeting place for both of those, because historical fiction requires quite a bit of research. And there is nothing more fascinating to me than learning something new and finding out about something I didn't know anything about and getting the little nitty gritty details. And I always love it when I discover a fact and it's like, oh my gosh, that's what I can use to make this story move forward. That's what I've been looking for. Now I know what I can do. Now I know exactly where my story's going next because of this thing that I just found. And so for me, there's a lot of joy in that I don't know, delving into.
Yeah.
I can definitely go down rabbit holes. I have to remind myself, Teri, you're not a researcher, you're an author. Come out of there. You got to write.
But it is, as you say, like the research is important, because especially when it comes to historical fiction, it has to be, I mean, obviously you kind of have to think about who's going to be reading your book, and it could be a mixture of people. But there will always definitely be that group. They see historical fiction and they'll be leaning more into the historical side of things, and they'll just be one of
you'll hear if you got it wrong.
Absolutely.
If you got it wrong, you will know that you got it wrong. And so I always tell people, I really do my dead level best when I'm writing historical fiction to be as historically accurate as possible, given that I was not there.
Yeah, of course.
Right. And that I'm doing research, and that at some point you have to stop researching.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. Otherwise, you could research forever. I know people who write historical fiction who tell me, oh, I researched this book for 15 years. I do not have that kind of time. I do not want to spend 15 years researching one book. And so I say it's as accurate as I can make it. And if you find something that is accurate, definitely let me know about that, because maybe I can fix it for the next book. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Definitely, because I think if you over research something, the story probably gets lost in it, because
I would think so.
Yeah, because like the time period that it's set in surely is meant to just be the background, and it's like how you fit the story into that, really, isn't it?
And so you're looking for those little tidbits that let your reader feel that they're there, and little tidbits that can move your story forward.
Yeah.
That thing that you're like, oh yeah, that's how I'm going to get from point A to point B, is because of this thing that happened.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And that's what you need to do. Like in my second book, which is An Enemy Like Me, it's during World War II, but I have a young man, and his father dies, he ends up getting Lockjaw.
Oh,
And I could do it because his father would have gotten lockjaw just a few years before they had a vaccine for lockjaw. Right.
oh,
And so you can, oh, I could make that work. And that's how that's going to happen. And so you have to kind of keep looking for those things that, and throughout he'll think things like, my dad could have been around
yeah,
had this only happened to him a few years later, those kinds of things. And that's what your story is, those pieces of information that bring your reader there and move your story forward. And
yeah.
if you do too much research, it's going to start reading like a history book
Yes,
instead of a novel.
of course. Yeah. That's incredible. And when you say there about the historical facts, little tidbits, and particularly the World War II aspect of that,
Yeah.
like that is right up like my wife's street, because my wife is a sort of she's like a master's in history, and she does that as well. She loves her research. She'll always listen to like some audiobook or like historical piece in the car, and she'll come home and she'll tell me like a new fact about something, and it's just like,
Right.
and it's the sort of thing as well when if she ever like listens to historical fiction or watches something on TV or something, that she's that kind of person who's just like, oh yeah, that's right, this is so true, or no, this is not quite accurate, and it's
No,
like,
that could have never happened. That could have never
yeah,
happened. Yeah. And like I said, I do my best, but I do tell people I'm not a
mhm,
historian. I do not have a master's or a doctorate
yeah,
in history, and so you have to remember it is fiction.
yep.
So, give a little tiny bit of grace. But yeah, if you find something that's incorrect, I always love to learn. I love learning. And so definitely point it out to me. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I'd like to know. I'd
Yeah.
like to know what I did wrong and could I make it better? And, maybe the next time, the book comes out, I can fix that little piece if it's fixable, you know?
Definitely, yeah. I do think it's like, yeah, the research is important. Like
Yeah.
it's, and it does, because it's like you said before, you want people to be put into that sort of time period. You want people to sort of, when they're reading it, feel like they were there, and at the same time, it's a nice little piece for the history buffs to actually be like, oh yeah, I know about this, because it
I
resonates with
knew about
people,
that.
and
Right.
like, and that's what kind
Absolutely.
of stories do with people who read them. There's always something that resonates with somebody in like different ways, and that's why it's like one of the more amazingly expressive art forms. Um,
I think that what's interesting for me is I'm right now writing a contemporary piece, and I would have thought that I would need very little research because, I live now and I know now. But I have one of my characters is a real estate agent, and I'm not one.
yeah,
And so I had to do a little bit of research on being a real estate agent because I have her leaving her employment and going to start her own agency. And I needed to know, can she do that?
yeah,
In the state of North Carolina, where I have her living, is that even possible? What would she have had to have done prior to? Would that have been something that she could have done while she was working under someone else? If the answer is no, how long would it take her to get a
yeah,
license? If the answer is yes, how long does it take to get a like all of those things? Because that's another thing that even if it's contemporary, you don't want to pull your reader out of the story
no,
for
of
them to
course,
go, oh, that's not the way that works.
yeah, of
Because
course,
once they're out, then they're out.
yeah, yeah, and like, because you could almost find then like the reader is almost getting sidetracked by
Yes.
the nitty gritty, the detail, and then like you
And
said, it
they're
just
and they're
takes you
no
from the
longer
story.
part of the book.
Yeah,
Now they're like, well, that could never happen. And once they believe it could never happen, you've pretty much lost them
yeah,
for the book. They're gonna have trouble believing anything else that you say because they caught you in a blunder. And they're like, well, there's just no way. I mean, she could have never been a real estate agent. Well, from this point on, everything that woman does is suspect.
yeah, absolutely.
So you have to be really careful at it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it is incredible, like the amount of like research and work that has to go into
Yeah.
these stories, especially because like for being fiction, it's very true to life. It's you can relate to the situations that they're in, and like it is important to make it as kind of realistic as possible, and that's incredible. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So stepping away from the fictional writing for a second, so your latest book, as we've mentioned before, is out now, released in February. 10 Little Rules for a Double Butted Adventure, and this
Mhm.
is you and your husband taking a tandem bike ride from the port from Oregon to Washington D.C.
Washington, D.C. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We rode 3,102 miles.
Wow.
And that is a long way on a bicycle.
Yep.
If you're wondering, that's a very long way on a bicycle. It's something that my husband had wanted to do since 1976. He saw a group of college kids ride across the United States. He was in the military at the time. It's not like his sergeant was going to give him 3 months off to go do a cool thing. And then he stayed 25 years in the military. And then when he got out of the military, he, went straight into another job. And it was just always something on his mind. Well, he and I met and started dating in 2018. And he told me about this thing that he wanted to do, that he'd always wanted to ride across the United States. And I had been wanting to do a big adventure because I had been in this abusive relationship for 14 years. And I kind of felt like I was done, like I was finished, like my life was kind of over. I didn't feel that I had a lot of value. And I wanted to prove to people that maybe there was something left inside of me. It turns out no one else thought that. It was just me, but I felt that I needed to prove it. And so when he brought up this idea of riding across the United States on a bicycle, I looked at him and said, so is this something that you're really going to do? Or are you just going to talk about it until the day you die? And he said, no, I really want to do it. I said, count me in.
Brilliant.
And we were just dating. I had no intention of ever getting married again. And I wasn't going to marry him. I wasn't going to marry anyone, but I figured I could go on an adventure with someone.
Oh, yeah.
Like that would be cool, right?
Absolutely.
And turns out we got married. Then we went on the adventure. But yeah, for me, it was huge because at the point that he and I started dating, I had not been on a bicycle in 40 years.
Wow.
So this was not Teri doing normal stuff. This was well outside of my wheelhouse. My husband, on the other hand, has been cycle racing and ever since high school. And so he was really good at it and I was not. And so the tandem bicycle made the most sense for us because he can't go faster than me and I can't go slower than him. It really equalized us so that we could go on this together. Because otherwise he would have always been 4 hours ahead of me and I would have always been bringing up the rear and I would have always been miserable and it wouldn't have been any fun for me. And as it was an amazing trip that really brought us really close together and healed a lot of pieces of me that had been damaged from those years of abuse.
Yeah, of course. Like, it's such a incredible shift for yourself going from this relationship to thinking you can't really do anything after that. And just kind of, like you said, you kind of felt like there was no purpose anymore. But then all of a sudden, you're out there living so many people's dreams of just like traveling, especially like, throughout the States. How many people have never left the state that they live in America?
Exactly.
There's probably countless people and you've just gone across the entire country. I don't want to quite say on a whim, but more just like you've just had this, like, your husband has wanted to do this and you've just
and I, like I said, I went with it. It was like, oh, wow, that's an adventure. I could do that. Let's go do that. The really crazy thing is we had it planned and then COVID hit and we went during the summer of 2020. So we went during COVID summer when everybody else was, stuck at home with masks and unable to go anywhere. We were going from town to town to town on a bicycle, pulling a trailer with all of our camping gear in it and just going from place to place to place. And, when I think about COVID, I have a very, very different understanding of what it was like because we got out and we went and we did a lot of really cool things. And the trip was different than we had planned because there was COVID and some things were closed and people were a little less willing to help out because they were afraid of like, where have you been last and those kinds of things. But we still got out. And so for part of June, all of July, August, September, and the first week of October, we were not stuck at home.
Yep.
We were out doing. In fact, when we came back home, we felt like we were more likely to get COVID here than we felt the entire time that we were out cycling. So
yeah, that sort of, if that doesn't sum up COVID, I don't know what.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's it. That in itself is incredible because you have traveled across the country during a time that the entire world was shut down. So,
Yeah,
in essence, you've been able to sort of like see so many different places at like its most tranquil, at its most peaceful, at,
absolutely.
at a time where you probably needed it most as well. So, like, that's just sort of. I have no words for how amazing that is, and so
It was the coolest experience ever. I
yeah,
learned the person that I was at the beginning of that trip is not the person that
hmm
finished the trip. I changed tremendously. I started out as very anxious and afraid, and by the end I was very confident and knew that I could do it, and knew that I could dig deep, and that when I dug deep, there was more of me down in there, and all I had to do was access it so that I could, do what needed
yeah,
to be done. And I learned a lot about how I handle things. Like, I'm a crier, and it used to really, really upset me that I would cry. And then I learned that's just how I deal. I go
yeah,
ahead and cry. I get the emotion out of my system, and as soon as I do, I can then say, okay, what really needs to happen?
yeah.
And then I can do that. I can't be logical until I go ahead and let the big burst of emotion out of me. And so I'm a crier. And I've come to just accept that's who I am, and I'm not worried about it anymore. Whereas it used to be something that I hated about myself.
Mhm.
I hated that I would be the one that would be standing there sobbing. And now I just think, well, it's just who I am.
Absolutely. Like, and every single person has different coping mechanisms for everything that they
Right.
go through, and like, do you know what? Crying is therapeutic. I am just going to
It
go out and
is.
say that right now. Crying is therapeutic, and like it's whenever you cry, you almost feel like all of the negative emotions flushing out. That's genuinely,
It
and it
it
may
it
sound silly, but
does.
I genuinely that is what I believe. So, do you know what? Fair play.
Well,
Absolutely.
and I know that for me, once those big emotions, I've let them out, then I'm able to say, okay, being
Mm,
realistic, standing here crying isn't going to solve anything. So what is going to solve this problem? And then I can come up with solutions.
yeah.
And these solutions were completely hidden from me while I was feeling so emotional. So, my first response is, woe is me, my life is ending as we know it, and then I cry, and it's like, oh, okay, so life really isn't ending. Here's some things that we can do.
Yeah, it's like amazing how you can like rationalize everything just
Yeah,
like from getting a little bit of emotion out. Like it's incredible. The human psyche is just such an incredibly amazing, interesting thing. Um,
absolutely.
so on your latest book, so you've shifted from fiction to nonfiction to
Right.
somewhat of a. Could you go as far to call it a self help book in a way, or
So it's in kind of a self-help genre. I call it more like inspirational
yeah,
memoir ish.
yeah,
It's, once again, I wrote it without trying to genre it.
of
I,
course,
I wrote this. And so what it is as I went across the United States, I kept a blog every day. So if you want to read the blow by blow every single day, head on over to my website. The blog's there. You can read every detail, what the wind was like, what the temperatures were like. That's not what this book is. As I was looking over that blog, when we were all done, I realized that I was learning these things, that I was becoming like I would figure things out because of what happened.
yeah,
So these are 10 little rules that I learned. And these are things that I just kind of figured out about life. And maybe it's not that I'd never heard it before, but that I hadn't internalized it
yeah,
before. And now this was something that I knew that I could use in my own life that would allow me to continue being adventurous. And by adventurous, I don't mean you have to get on a bicycle and go 3,000 miles, but anything that's kind of like outside of your normal comfort zone.
yeah.
And that could be, hey, I want to learn to play the piano, but I'm 60. Or it could be, I want to get into this new relationship, but it's a little scary. Or it
Yeah.
could be, my kids are all moving out and I have no idea what I'm going to do as an empty nester. Right. Or it could be, I need to get out of this relationship that I've been in a long time, but it's not good for me anymore. And I need not to be here. Any of those things are what I would consider to be an adventure. That's something
Absolutely.
outside of your normal day to day living. And these rules are things that helped me like navigate all of that. But I tell people I am not the expert of anyone but me. So in the end of each chapter, I have questions that you can kind of answer and journal to. And my hope is some of my rules will be helpful to you. Some of my rules will help you come up with your own rules.
Yeah.
Maybe my 10 rules aren't the rules you need. Maybe you need some other rules, but maybe my 10 rules will help you decide what your 10 rules are. So that's kind of the point of this book, is just how can you live an adventurous life, however you define adventure.
And that's like a really good way to spin it as well, because like when you put it like that, regardless of whoever reads it, there's always something for somebody to take out of it. Whether it's the case of they word for word they can empathize with their own situation, or it's like, oh, okay, no, I can't, but there's some kind of like sort of chain reaction with it, with other people's personal
Makes you
experiences.
think about something, that makes you think
Exactly.
about something that you then go, oh,
Yeah.
for me, what it would be, and then write that down, use that in your own life, find a way to like internalize that for yourself.
Yeah, of course. And I do think it's such an incredible thing what we can learn about ourselves from just stepping out of our comfort zone. Like, you use the
Yeah.
term comfort zone. I think it's like the best way to put it, because, and I'm sure obviously in your position, traveling across the entire country with your husband, that's when you really get to know somebody. And like you say, it brought you guys closer together, which is
Well, we tell
incredible.
everybody that the 3 months on the tandem, so it was 3 months and a couple of weeks, that was like 20 years of marriage. So in real life, our anniversary is coming up, so it would be 6 years, and in tandem time, it would be 26 years. And that's good. A
Yeah,
lot of people kind of laugh and
absolutely.
go, oh, and it's like, no, no, that's actually a good
Yeah.
thing, because we had everything we did, we had to do together. You
Yeah.
don't ride a tandem bicycle alone. You don't set up tents alone. You don't do all the cooking and things that you have to do alone. And we were together nonstop for 3.5 months. I relied on him and he relied on me. And that's who we had to rely on, because we didn't know anyone else.
Yeah.
Right. And because of that, we grew very close. And yeah, 20 years of marriage. I mean, if you want to accelerate where you are in your marriage, I do suggest getting on a tandem bicycle and going for 3 months. You'll definitely get it figured out.
I fully believe that as well, because it's not just a matter of spending that time together that you would be at home anyway, but
Right.
it's what you're experiencing together within that 3 months. And like you say, the reliance on each other for things, you're doing everything together. It's a lot different than just
It's not like sitting at home watching television.
exactly. Yeah, you're
But
experiencing life together, and
exactly.
whilst
And
you're together.
difficult pieces too.
Yeah.
I mean, we took a tandem bicycle that's fully loaded. So it has a trailer with all our camping gear, and it's got bags hanging on the wheels, and the whole 9 yards. And we went over the Rocky Mountains. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't sitting and watching television. This took he and I doing things together, understanding how far can he push me?
Yeah.
How far can he push himself? At what point do we take breaks? How does he handle me crying on the side of the road? All of those things we had to figure out together.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Like, and it's I mean, it's just incredible. That's the only thing I can really say about it, is that it is just incredible. And the fact that you've learned so much about yourself on this journey, you've been able to write it down, put it onto paper, and put it out for people to as a gift, essentially, for people to be like, look, this is what I learned about myself. Like, this is what you can, if you can take something away from this, fantastic, because you step out of your comfort zone, anything you're doing is an adventure, and you will learn so much about yourself and what you can do. And I certainly believe that when you do things like that, it opens up so many things that you just didn't know about yourself, and things that you're capable of. I think, to go back to your point, what you said earlier, like, you realized you can do absolutely anything. if you just go and do it.
Yeah.
Like for me, stepping out of my comfort zone was starting a podcast at 30 years old. Like it just kind of like I was never a confident speaker, and now I'm able to just kind of do things like this. So like I totally understand like your
Yeah.
message
Well,
behind that.
and I think one of the things that I really love telling people is you have inside of you what you need.
Yeah.
It's there. Now, maybe you don't know how to access it. Maybe you've buried it under so much crud that you can't find the pieces of it, but it's there. And so if you can't access it, if you don't feel that it's there, if you feel like you're stopped and blocked and unable, well, that's where I say reach out to someone, find a therapist, find a pastor, find a friend, talk to your
Mm-hmm.
spouse, like read a good book, do something, because I didn't gain anything while on the trip. I found
Yeah.
things while on the trip. It was all there in me. I had it all there. It just had been buried. It had been completely covered up under all kinds of lies and things that I began to believe about myself that were not true.
Yeah.
And as you're able to wipe those away, I would think about things like, you're not capable. And it was like, but I am. Look at me. I'm out here on this bicycle doing something that's well outside of what I'm comfortable doing, and I'm succeeding at it. And being able to then say, okay, so let's look at this I'm not capable statement. Well, that is no longer true.
Exactly.
And then you can put that away. And then every now and then, I'm not saying it never pops up, because every now and then something will pop up and I'll think, oh, I can't do that. I'm not capable. And then it's like, no, wait a minute. Is it that you're not capable, or is it that it's just not something you wish to do?
Yeah. That's an important
Because the
distinction to
truth,
make.
yeah, because the truth is that I had someone say to me, well, I'll bet you could run a marathon. And I said, you're right, I could. I have zero desire to do it, and I will never, ever, ever, ever do it.
Yeah.
But I could. I have no doubt that if it was something that I wanted to do, that I could do it. I have no doubt about that. It's just not anything that, thrills me at all. And so when you start to feel those things like, oh, I can't, reframe it. Is it you don't want to? Because you're allowed to say that.
Yeah.
You're allowed to say, uninterested, thanks so much. But if it is something you want to do, then you can do it. You just have to figure out how to get around the roadblocks, because there will always be roadblocks.
Of course, yeah. And it is a very important distinction to make between inability and versus just lack of desire, because
Right.
and ultimately it comes down to self-belief, really, because like you say, the blockers are inside you. You have to kind of have to do some digging, some soul searching, whatever it may be, reach out to people who can help to find it. But people can genuinely do anything they want, unless there are genuinely physical blockers that stop people.
Yes. I
Unless
mean,
there's
and I say that people can do anything. And then, of course, with the caveat that there are
Yeah.
some things that, I can never be an ice skater. Like I'll never be able to do that, especially at 60. I mean, there are certain things that you have to say, okay, so that's not going to be. Now, if I wanted to learn to ice skate, I think I could do that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, would I ever become famous at it? Probably not. I waited a little late to become a famous ice skater. But there are things that if you really want to do it, you find a way around the roadblocks.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to do it, anything can stop you. Oh, my shoes are too tight. The sun came up in the east this morning. I mean, anything will stop you, right? It's so easy to find reasons to not do something. But boy, if you
100%.
want it, you will find a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I genuinely can give you like an example of this, a personal example that's happened to me. Now, this is going to sound the silliest thing, but like on principle, it's exactly what we're talking about here. So,
Right.
I woke up to go into the office the other day for work. I woke up a little bit late, and I think this was me trying to rationalize it in my own head. But I goes, so it was 6 a.m. in the morning, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to make it in work. I'm not going to make it into the office on time. So no, I can't go into the office today. I'm just going to work from home. And then my wife turns to me and goes, really? But if you get up, you can be out in 15 minutes. And I was like, I don't want to though. So
Yes, and isn't that the thing? And it's like it's very similar to, well, the sun already came up in the
yeah.
east this morning, and that's just ruined my whole day. And it's like, well, the sun comes up in the east every morning. My point exactly.
Yeah.
I just can't do that.
Oh, 100%.
And that is, we can talk ourselves out of anything we don't want to do.
Yeah, for sure.
But
And
if you want it, I mean, COVID happened, and
yeah,
we still managed to go on this ride because we wanted it, and so we figured out a way to make it happen. And
yeah.
that's just what you do. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And like just on the point of COVID, like you made an interesting point that COVID was so different for you. And I am always very intrigued by people's experiences with COVID, and especially within like a creative arts kind of setting as well. Um, but obviously the interesting thing about your position was like COVID sort of was almost your gateway into doing this because of what you learned, the confidence and the new journey of that. What I find the most interesting about your latest book in terms of that is like almost you could almost sort of argue it's like a sort of meet the writer behind these books kind of thing, and I think that's like it's
Yeah.
like the perfect prequel to the three
Yeah,
novels that you've done.
it actually is, because without the ride, I might still be writing manuscripts and not showing them to anyone because I
Mhm.
didn't have confidence. I was writing. In fact, my first novel I had already written, which is why I was able to get it out in 14 months. It was written. I wasn't showing it to anyone.
No.
And I wasn't showing it to anyone because I wasn't confident. I didn't feel that I was actually a writer. I didn't feel that I was good enough. But I came home from that ride and I thought, well, it's what I want.
Yeah,
So if it's what I want, why am I letting something stop me?
absolutely. Yeah.
And
And
I
like
found an editor, and bam, the book came out. And so I think you're right. It is my more or less origin story. Like, how did I get from the meek writer who was afraid to show anybody anything to someone who can say, hey, I've written a really good book, you should read it. And that didn't happen just because I wrote enough. That happened because I had this big transformation while on this ride that changed me fundamentally from that scared, anxious person who didn't believe in herself to someone who said, I'm capable.
absolutely. And I think three novels, a sort of memoir, short stories, and an upcoming children's book later, I think that kind of proves that down to a T.
Thank you.
Of course. So, what can we then expect from you from in the future in terms of do you have any upcoming projects, any new novels, or more short stories, or anything that you
Yes.
can divulge on at this moment in
Yeah,
time?
so I just wrote a short story that I'm hoping will be in an anthology. I had a short story put into an anthology called Feisty Deeds, and they're doing a Feisty Deeds 2, and it is historical fiction, women, and this is supposed to be around like potions
Oh,
and
okay.
mixtures and things. And I had an idea, so I've written for that. We'll see if it makes the cut. Um, like I said, I have a children's book, picture book coming out, and that's because I have a granddaughter who asked me, Gigi, when are you going to write something for me? I said, okay, well, we'll do that next.
Of course.
And then I'm currently writing a contemporary humor about a woman who is going through menopause. And it's just a very tongue-in-cheek
Yeah.
look at hot flashes and the mental fog, and I can't find my phone that I'm talking on, and where did I put my glasses on my head, and why is my skin so dry, and all of the things, but done in a very funny
Yeah.
tongue-in-cheek way that I think that women will enjoy, just laughing along with the protagonist as she tries to navigate this whole thing. So
Excellent. Very good. And honestly, I look forward to seeing all that as well. Terry, it has been incredible having you on Behind the Camera with Andy Games tonight. Thank you so much for your time. And it has been an absolute pleasure hearing your story and a very, very inspirational. I think there's so much for people to take out of this tonight with your journey of like self-learning and just being capable, just
yeah.
being capable I think that's the main message that people can take away from this today. So where can we find your works, your website, everything about you? Where can we find that for the listeners?
The best place is to go to my website, and there you can find everything. And so my website is my name, Teri M. Brown, and that's Teri with one R. There you can join my newsletter. You can find everything that I've written, and you can purchase it on my website. I actually have a podcast as well called Online for Authors, where I talk with other authors like me who are relatively new in the business. And so if you're looking for your next best read, that's a great podcast to listen to. I even have just a contact page. Like if you want to reach out and contact me, just, do that. And then of course, all my social media links are there. So I'm on everything. So if you're on something and you want to find me, just click the icon.
Brilliant. That is amazing. Teri, thank you so much again for your time. It has been incredible having you, and all the best for the future.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been wonderful.
No problem at all. Thank you. And there you have it. That was my conversation with Teri M. Brown, an absolutely stellar example of the fact it's never too late to follow your passions, discover new things about yourself, and that no matter your situation, you have much more self-worth than you realize. A true inspiration, and I'm so glad to have had the chat that I did with her. As always, this has been Behind the Camera with Andy Games. I've been your host, Andy Games. If you enjoyed what you heard today, any and all likes, comments, subscriptions, follows, and reviews are all hugely appreciated and do go a long, long way. We will be back soon with another installment of Behind the Camera with Andy Games, but until then, peace.